to business straight away. So the first item is the minute of the last meeting. So that's pages 5 to page 14. So I'll not go through them, but if there's any questions or comments, just raise your hands. Otherwise, I'll take it as it's an accurate account of the minute. Okay, so that's agreed. Then we go into the IGB action log. 2 seconds. Flicking over pages. Right. Here we go. So the first item on it is the NHS GGC Mental Health Strategy Renfrewshire Implementation Update. And that has been updated, so that is actually completed. We've got Unscheduled Care Winter Update. And update for the NHS GGC is scheduled to come forward in January. So I think that's actually, we've got that as part of this agenda. Unscheduled Care Winter Update. And then we have the Chair and Vice Chair of the IGB Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee. The report was submitted to the following integration scheme. It's fine. Arrangements of the future meetings. And that's what we were discussing there. We were saying that we'd agreed last year that come March we would take a decision. So the hope is that we return in June to in-person meetings. Ian McMillan, I see your hands up.
Right, thanks very much. I know we had an informal discussion there, but now the meeting's actually formally started, I would like to refer back to the development session when we agreed unanimously to have a meeting held in public in March. Now, I know there was a previous agreement to have it in June, but I thought the discussion and development would have superseded all that. So I'm going to formally move, and I don't know if I'll get a seconder, but I'll certainly ask for a seconder, but I'm going to formally move that the meeting in March be held in public or face-to-face, whatever way you want to put it. I'm moving that, and I'm asking for a seconder, given the fact that we'd already agreed and discussed this at the development session in December.
Okay, well, as I was saying previously before the meeting started, when we were having an informal discussion about it, it was an informal discussion at the development day as well, and any decisions are always made by the board at the board meetings, not at development day. So that was my first take on it from the start. But I will ask if MD is willing to second you, Ian. Do I have a seconder for Ian? So it doesn't look like you have a seconder. So in this occasion, Ian, would you like us to note your disdain?
If you can note that, and I feel badly let down given the discussion we had in December.
Well, I'm sad that you feel let down, Ian, because we've been honest and transparent about this. You know, we all want to go back. We were waiting for the technology that would support us to go back for a start. We're obviously agreeing that instead of waiting for this technology, that we'll actually go back and we'll go into the chamber, which is something we've never done in the past, because we felt as if it was a very formal environment for the IGB. But we decided the importance of us getting back together face to face, therefore we'll go into the chamber. So we bring it forward like the IGB already had previously agreed. We'll bring it forward and agree it, and we'll be back in person in June. Okay, so if that's that, we'll just move on. So the next item is the Renfrewshire Alcohol, Drug and Partnership Survey report we've provided and details when available. Then you've got the performance scorecard. And then we've got the Chief Officer's report, obviously part of this agenda, and the development of the Sustainable Futures Programme. This was issued in December, response received from the Cabinet Secretary, and nothing from the Prime Minister. So that's it, rolling action log. Right, if we go on to item 4, which is, oh, Ian McMillan, is that a historic hand, Ian?
No, I just wanted to come in that last part of the rolling log about the response from the Cabinet. Is it not worthy of maybe having some conversation? I certainly thought it was a poor response, and I certainly note that we've not had any response at all from the other people. Now, I know
from Westminster, I know. I was disappointed in that. I was pleased we received a response from the Scottish Government and totally ignored by Westminster, I know.
Which is pretty poor, but as I say, I just thought the response from the Cabinet Secretary was poor. It was basically just kind of got on with it. maybe I'm just being overly optimistic, but I know there are possibly some Barnet consequentials coming our way. We've got a budget meeting. The Scottish budget's still to be finalised. It's the usual, nobody knows what's going on with the Scottish budget, and I know there's a COSLA meeting this morning. Maybe there'll be a wee bit more come out of that. There's a UK budget in the 6th of March as well. So it's still very much a kind of up in the air situation. So let's hope some of the cuts that we were proposing might not happen. As I say, maybe I'm being overly optimistic and overly hopeful, but you have to be like that, because if you just you've got to be
optimistic.
Because if you were just to go with everything as it is, it's all doom and gloomy, you would just walk away, wouldn't you?
No, absolutely. I agree with you in that, Ian. Okay, that is then. Right, so we move on to item 3, which is the update of the terms of reference for the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee. I believe, Nairn, are you speaking to this?
Speaking, yes, in place of Mark Conahan, but really I've not got a great deal to say. The terms, the proposed amendments to the terms of reference are there in the report. Appendix 2 shows the tracked changes, and Appendix 3 shows the clean copy with the changes accepted, should that be the decision of the IJB this morning. In effect, these are largely tightening up some of the language and some of the punctuation and that kind of thing round about it. So they're relatively minor changes. They're not making major. They're not really changing the position, if you like, as far as the remit. They're just clarifying what the remit that's being worked to is, and as I say, making other fairly minor cosmetic changes.
Yes, Nairn. Mags, would you like to comment on anything?
Yeah, I think what Nairn said's fair, and some of it was to reflect some activity that the committee was doing but wasn't formally in the terms of reference. It also comes out of, we did the self-assessment just to tighten up, to make sure we were doing everything expected. So I think we've talked about that at IGB, certainly at development session before, so I'll not go through that again. But we've not, just to flag, we've not had Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee since the last IGB, so there's no further update to bring you this morning.
Okay, thanks for that, Max. Oh, crikey.
Convener, I wonder if I could just come in on a slightly separate point, but it's worth me drawing your attention to this at this point. At the top of the meeting, I don't think we had an opportunity to receive apologies and for members to make a declaration of interest. So I wonder if now might be a appropriate moment to do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. You're absolutely right, and actually, Elaine flagged that up to me as well. Sorry, apologies, Elaine. Can we go back and?
Sure. Just to say, I've got apologies from Anne Cameron Burns, and Michelle Wales is attending the meeting in her place this morning. I've got apologies from Stephen Cruikshank and Dr. Shilpa Shivaprasad and Annie here.
Okay, thanks, Elaine. And do we have any declarations of interest, transparency statements? We're all right. Good. Right, apologies for that. Okay then, so that was as agreed item 3. So that takes us on to the Chief Officer report. I believe David's presenting this. David?
Yeah, that's myself, Jennifer, thank you. So I won't go into too much detail on the contents of this paper, as there is quite a lot covered in it, both from a local and national perspective. However, following these few words, the SMT is available to answer any questions that members might have on any specific points within the paper. In terms of the key HSCP updates that we've included for this meeting, we do know a range of work that's being undertaken locally in line with the Scottish Government's tobacco and vaping framework, which was published just after the last meeting in November 2023. And we've also included an update on the Scottish Government and COSLA's Equally Safe strategy, which is focused on preventing and eradicating violence against women and girls. And we've also noted actions related to that the Renfrewshire Gender-Based Violence Strategy Group will take to update our own local strategy to reflect the work that has been done nationally. We also briefly note work that's been undertaken across Greater Glasgow and Clyde to refresh the Health Board's quality strategy. And we noted at the last meeting that work was planned on that with an open session with the invitees from across HSCPs across the board and internationally, and the HSCPs continuing to actively contribute to that work. And we also highlight from a local perspective the publication of a delivery plan for year 1 of the National Suicide Prevention Strategy. And we also note that local work that is associated with that strategy is being taken forward, led by Christine and through the Suicide Prevention Strategy Group for Renfrewshire. There's also a number of national updates that are included in the paper, and I'll not go into these in too much detail. Ian's already mentioned kind of some of the uncertainties around the Scottish Government's budget, which was announced on the 19th of December, and we do await further information on that to understand the full implications of it for the IJB. However, we do note in the paper that this will be challenging for all of the public sector. We've also included a more detailed progress update on activity relating to the development of the NCS. This does note that there's quite a number of significant revisions that have been made by the Scottish Government to the proposed bill, and also to the nature and scale of changes that are proposed within the NCS. I think members will be aware that when we've spoken previously about the proposals, implementation for a National Care Service had been intended to be completed within this parliamentary term, so really by 2026. However, there's been quite a significant change to those plans, with the intention that there's a national board established by 2025-26. However, local operational implementation will be over a much longer period, which is through to 2028-2029. The last point I would just note is that in relation to the NCS, we were expecting that the Stage 1 bill would be debated in Parliament this week. However, it was confirmed last week that that was then delayed until the 1st of March, so that debate is still to take place. I'll not go into any more detail on the paper just now, Jennifer.
Okay, David, thanks for that. Do we have any questions or comments on the paper? Fiona.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. Question just as in relation to the National Survey Response Rate. That's item 4, I think it's page 35, 11.2. It's good to see an increase in the response rate that's there, but the paper doesn't say if the 58% from our own HSCP was up or down or similar to before. So it would be helpful to get some clarification in terms of that. And also the Employee Engagement Index score of 76. Is this relating to positive feedback or merely the number of responses that were received? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Fiona.
Sure. Fiona, I can answer those, and I can bring in Francis on the matter as well if we need to. In terms of the HSCP's response, I think we were 1 percentage point down on last year's response rate, however, very, very close, and we've been at a very similar level over the last few years. The Employee Engagement Index number is a calculation that's taken on the whole range of responses that are provided. So effectively, there's a calculation that's done in the background to take the kind of the positivity in terms of the responses that are provided, and it gives you an overall view so that on a year-by-year basis, you can then do a comparison in terms of overall kind of employee sentiment. So it's an overall kind of assessment rather than a number of responses.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt, Fiona. Ian, I see your hands up.
Well, thanks very much. Just 2 or 3 points here. Delighted to see the new tobacco and vaping framework coming forward. We had a debate on this last week in the council. Bizarrely enough, it was in the board which mainly deals with housing. It's a bit of a strange link, but nevertheless, it was quite a passionate and heartfelt discussion on that from the members of that particular board, and I think we're all concerned with the number of particularly young people who are using these vapes. You just need to have a walk around some of our high schools and you'll see them, the rubbish all lying about. And I thought we were on the right road with tobacco, and we are on the right road with tobacco with young people, but these vapes have just suddenly appeared from nowhere, and it's been a bit of a game changer. And I know it's very difficult for the teaching staff to try and curtail this activity. You know, it's like with young people, 2 or 3 people start it, suddenly it's cool, and then before you know it, lots and lots of kids are doing it. So, you know, let's hope this new legislation helps. Also, I had a wee laugh to myself about the Verity House agreement. you know, it's the bit I've marked out is each individual's, it's the role and responsibility of each individual local authority to manage their own budgets and allocate total financial resources. Now, as we know, the First Minister recently announced a council tax freeze, which I think took a lot of people by surprise, particularly within his own cabinet. I know this morning at COSLA, they're talking about the possibility of, we'll take the 4.4%, which might help with the freeze, but the councils should be allowed to have a bit of flexibility to add a wee bit onto that. And I think if we are allowed to do that, it would certainly make a bit of a difference. Now, you might think that's just all to do with the council, but I think there'd be a kickback for IGBs as well. So let's hope that COSLA can get its way with that one. The last point is the National Care Service. You know, it's something I certainly would welcome, a National Care Service, but only if it means actually improving services to local people. If it's just another layer of bureaucracy, and if it's another way of tightening the Scottish Government's grip in local authorities and local health boards, well, I'm totally against it. And I can see that it's obviously, I wouldn't say it's quite kicked into the long grass, but it's not going to really happen for a few years. And again, at today's COSLA meeting, there'll be further discussions on that. But that's a kind of a moving thing, the National Care Bill. But that's the points I'd like to make. Thank you.
All right, Ian, thanks, that's noted. Margaret, I see your hands up.
Thanks. Morning, everyone. David, it's not specifically covered in the report. I don't think I've missed it, but I'm just looking for a quick update on Renfrewshire's delayed discharge position. We've always held quite a strong position, and given the winter's very difficult for health services, just a bit of an update for the board would be helpful, please.
Oh, you're on mute, David.
I can come in and pick
yeah,
that.
I think Karen, you could come in on that one.
Yeah. We continue to perform at a high level, Mag. So currently we're still #1 in Scotland in terms of our performance. At the moment, we're still in single digits in terms of our delayed discharge performance. We've made really significant progress in relation to our adults with incapacity. Up until about 6 months ago, we talked about our figure being perhaps 5 or 6 that we were looking for at any one time, and that had been quite a significant reduction in progress for us. But over the last few months, our adults with incapacity who are delayed in their discharge is now sitting between 0 and 1. So that's been significant progress in that. And that's been a lot of work with our local solicitors. The team have worked really, really hard to build those relationships and also to utilise other pieces of legislation like interim orders. And we continue to see significant progress in our care at home. We now haven't had a care at home delay in relation to our delayed discharge for probably since October. The team have worked really, really hard. The biggest part of our delays is around people making choices of care homes, and it's normally predominantly that's nursing homes. So that's where our delays sit around, and we're on average sitting between 6 and 9 delays at any one time. One of them is our adult with incapacity. Currently, we have 2 of our patients in closed wards because of COVID, and we have 6 people who we are moving forward. So that's our current position this morning, and that performance has been maintained. And I don't know if the IJB members are aware, we had a visit from the Cabinet Secretary a few weeks ago, simply to understand our end-to-end processes in response to delays and to see if there's any learning that he could take from Renfrewshire's performance into other areas. So that was a well-received visit. He also visited the acute staff within the discharge lounge to see how we were working collaboratively together to keep the performance at the level it's at. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, Karen, because anecdotally I knew we were performing well still. I just wanted to formally hear where we were at, because that is incredibly helpful. Thank you.
It absolutely is, Karen, and I'm not surprised to hear that they want to learn lessons about, you know, why you're working so well in Renfrewshire with delayed discharge. As you say, it's very difficult given the challenges you're facing in every other element to still perform at that level. So a big thank you to all your team. I know how hard you work on it.
Thank you.
Right. No, oh, sorry, Jacqueline, I see your hands up.
Yes, thanks, Jennifer. Ian has covered what I was going to say about vaping. I was there at the housing board and we did have a good chat about vaping, and we know anecdotally, you know, young people are in the hospital presenting with collapsed lungs and things like this. So it's really, really good to see this work taking place. The other one that I wanted to talk about was the suicide prevention strategy. I was at the Population Health and Wellbeing Committee, chaired by our very own John Matthews, and we had a good chat there about younger women, particularly who are completing suicide, and it's specifically about pressures on social media, or maybe like bullying via Snapchat and things like that, and even things like TikTok videos, you know, with, you know, explanations about suicide. So it was a really good chat, and John Dawson was there from Public Health Scotland, and he's agreed to go away and look at that as part of that board strategy too. So it was a good chat, and although it kind of crosses over with CAMS a wee bit, I just kind of wanted to pull that out and talk about that, because, as I say, it was something that I wasn't aware of, and it was an interesting debate.
Absolutely. No, thanks for that, Jacqueline. I mean, absolutely, the pressure that comes with social media, and it's a whole different field now, isn't it, when it comes to bullying? You know, I know from my own stepkids, I remember a time his phone wouldn't stop all night long, and it was messages, as you say, from WhatsApp and Messenger. You say yourselves, these kids never sleep. So, you know, in my day, it would have been 9 till 3, your hours at school you had to worry about, but now it's, you know, 24/7. Christine.
It was just to say that I think we've discussed it at a previous IGB. So we do have a strategic suicide prevention group within Renfrewshire, chaired by myself. It's really well attended, and there's a real commitment from partners across Renfrewshire about joining together and seeing what we can do to reduce this. So we do have an action plan, and it was just to update that we absolutely see this as a real high risk and a high priority for us.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, so that's us. No more questions or comments on the Chief Officer's report. So that takes us on to the financial report from the 1st of April to the 30th of November. Sarah.
Okay, so as usual, I won't go through all of the detail in the report, but there's a couple of things I just want to draw to everybody's attention. The first is in section 1.4, just to remind people that this doesn't include the projections and the costs of the pay award for local government employed staff. And we think that's roughly 1.5 million that it's going to cost us, and that should be within people's pay within next week. I think it's 31st of January that will be processed. So we'll see the impact of that in the next report to the IJB. We haven't yet had the funding amount confirmed that we'll be getting. However, the council has confirmed that they will pass over our appropriate share. However, it's unlikely to fully meet that cost. Just what that shortfall will be, I don't know. I don't think it should be hugely significant, but I think we just need to wait to see exactly how much we'll be getting. And then if you turn to the next section 3.1, you'll see I've shown slightly differently the position of the IJB. And if you remember at the last IJB, I said that in order to try and protect and to maximise flexibility as much as possible, we would be drawing down in-year winter pressure monies, etc., to try and protect our general reserves. So the actual underlying overspend at the moment is 5.248 million. So that's the recurring overspend that we have, but it's being mitigated in the current financial year by drawdown of earmark reserves, and we'll be looking at as much as possible to protect our position for next year. The other thing that I would like to draw everybody's attention to, and Stuart, don't cringe if I don't pronounce this correctly, is we have had some positive news in terms of prescribing, which should help our projection and our year-end position slightly. So there's a drug called apixaban, which has now come off licence and it's moved to generic. And that basically means that other companies can now make it. It's not just a patented company that can make it. We're still working through the figures for that, but what that does mean is it's gone from roughly £50 down to £4.92. So
Wow.
in the current, it's a huge saving right across Greater Glasgow and Clyde. It's a huge difference. For us in this financial year, it could be roughly £500,000. And for 24-25, it will be probably over £1 million. So that's really good news for us. However, on the downside of it is that in the Scottish budget letters that we've received to date on the health side, there's a bit of a whammy, double whammy for us, because we are not receiving any uplift on the non-pay budget. So usually in the allocation there is an uplift on the non-pays, and that's significant for us because that's against prescribing as well. So we usually receive about 2% on prescribing, so we won't be receiving anything at all unless, as Ian suggests, there's any further Barnett consequentials, which there's been no discussion about at all. So at the moment there's no increase, so that was putting additional pressure, and it had actually moved our pressures from the 14.7 to over 16 million at the moment. So the pressures are moving kind of all over the place at the moment, and when we come to March with the budget, we'll have to take it at a point in time. But that was not good news, and we got that. However, this the movement of apixaban will help to mitigate that to some degree. However, it doesn't happen overnight because people have to be moved from drugs, so that, you know, there's a lot of work involved in changing. So that's really all I would say today. The remainder of the variances are as in line with what's been reported throughout the financial year. So hopefully that provides everybody with clarity. So there's no decisions to make today. It's just to note the financial position. Okay.
I see that. Thanks, Sarah. It never ceases to amaze me, the price of prescribing in certain medications. So is that, I know it's got nothing to do, is it like 10 years, Sarah, that they hold that kind of, you know, the patent for the drug and before it becomes generic and you can copy it? Is it as long as that?
I think it actually depends on each drug item. Stuart might know more of that, but
It's just a bye-bye.
I think it's very much dependent on the patent that's taken out at the time, and it would be variable.
I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it? £50 to £4, you know, it's unbelievable. John Matthews, I see your hands up, John.
Thanks. It's an easy question for Sarah. If you could tell the meeting what apixaban does for us when we get it as a pill.
Over to Stuart for that one. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So I think the patent is 20 years usually, but it might vary. Apixaban is effectively an anticoagulant. So it's one of the modern drugs that we use in place of warfarin. It's commonly used for people who have things like an irregular heartbeat, atrial fibrillation, who need anticoagulating, or people who've got a metal heart valve, people who have a tendency towards clots in the lung. You know, it's important to note it isn't just a cheaper, it will not just become a cheaper alternative for people who may be on a different one of the same group. It is often the first line treatment we would be recommending, for people anyway, and the cardiologists and colleagues would put that into the recommended clinical guidance anyway. So, it's a safe and effective drug, and it shouldn't make any significant difference to people when they're asked to swap. And obviously we rely on patients and the public to work with us when we do try and move people onto a similar drug in the same class. And the reason for that, as Sarah outlined, is a significant saving as well.
Thanks for that, Stuart. Thanks. Margaret, I see your hands up.
Thanks. Thanks, Sarah. It's just to follow up on the discussion about the P awards that are being agreed at the moment. And you'd referred to, you understand that the council intends to pass through an appropriate level. What's your understanding of what you mean by appropriate? Is that a full pass through of the funding that the council receives, or will there be a haircut in that in terms of what we get through in the partnership?
So my understanding is that we'll receive our pro rata share of what they get. So that we've yet to have the figures confirmed, but that's my understanding, that there isn't enough coming from the Scottish Government to fully fund the pay award. So we will get our share in relation to the number of staff and the costs associated with that. So that has been confirmed. We'll get an appropriate share. So
Thank you. Yeah, so
understanding.
appropriate being a fair share of that.
Yes.
But to be clear, the funding of the pay, there's this anomaly of there's non-pay items within that, I think is the phrase that's being used, but actually it all relates to pay increases that we have to pass on to staff, but in effect some of that's not funded, if I'm correct.
The amount that's covered, it's not really non-pay, the amount that's been allocated, because we all built 3% into the budget, and the Scottish Government, through various different funding strands, are funding some of the difference between the 3% and the roughly 6% that was agreed, but there's not enough to fully fund that difference. So we'll have to meet the whatever the difference is between what we get and the actual cost to it. But yeah, it actually, you know, you backdate it to the 1st of April last year, and that includes any overtime, everything. So our calculations, we assume it's about 1.5 million, but until we have all of that processed to the payroll, that, you know, it's difficult to fully estimate exactly how much that will be. But I'm hopeful that the shortfall won't be too significant, but I'll bring that to the IJB at the next meeting.
Okay,
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Max. So if we can just note the in-year position of the 30th of November, and if we can note the projected year-end position for 23-24. That's Sarah's financial report. And now we go on to item 6, which is the non-residential charging proposals. So
okay,
Sarah, is that you? Yep.
Yes, that's me. So I won't go through the papers in detail because it's quite lengthy, but there's a couple of things I did want to draw to everybody's attention. And the first is just to remind people that any changes to the current charging policy do require approval from the council. So the paper presented today is a proposal only, because the IJB doesn't have the power to change the charging policy and can only make recommendations to the council. And if the IJB approve the recommendations, we then formally request the council to develop a new contributions-based charging policy, and then it's for the council to decide whether to proceed with the changes or not. And any changes would be fully impact assessed, and we would work with the council on an engagement strategy with affected service users as part of that impact assessment process. But the final decision would actually rest with elected members of the council. So just to make sure that people are aware of that. Another thing to highlight is that the COSLA guidance for 24-25 was issued, I think it was yesterday. We've looked through it and to make sure that everything that we have in this policy is in line with that, and it is. The only differences are that the guidance for 24-25 has the rates for 24-25, so that's the uplifted rates. So when we're talking about the rates in ours, they would be uplifted in line with the COSLA guidance. And it's also just to remind people also that the non-residential charging policy is directly linked to COSLA guidance, but in itself, the guidance itself does highlight that it can be applied and interpreted in different ways, and actually is interpreted in 32 different ways. It's a very complex arena. It's very different to the guidance that sits aligned with the residential guidance, because that is legislative and directive, but for the non-residential charging, it's very much up to local discretion. So hopefully that covers that and explains the position for us today. So today you're actually being asked to note the content of the report, note the recommendations within the report, and approve the submission of these to Renfrewshire Council for consideration at the appropriate board within the council.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. I'd just like to thank you and your team as well for the time you've taken to go over with elected members and voting members, so we can understand exactly, you know, what's coming before us. So I really do appreciate the time you've given to it, Sarah. Do we have any questions or comments round about this? Kathleen.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to say really, and I'm not going to make much comment on the paper at the moment. Obviously, we know that we had to change the way the policy was. And I'm on the leadership board, as is Ian, so we'll be talking about that, when it comes to council. So just to say, if anyone's watching and thinking that we're not debating it, we'll be debating it at council. So that was all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Ian Milne.
I suppose similar to Jacqueline, it's a kind of bit strange way of doing it. I understand it and I get it, but for people who are maybe not so familiar with IJB workings, they probably say, well, what's happening here? Why are they not agreeing it or disagreeing it or having some sort of debate on it? I certainly have my concerns on it, and I think the fact that we had that wee session yesterday where a few of us were in attendance, that certainly brought it more alive to me. And I always like to see real life examples. I know they weren't real life examples; they were just made up, but they were pretty realistic scenarios. And I have slight concerns about the increasing rise in the taper, which means people are more out of pocket. And I was certainly, and I raised this yesterday, I was certainly concerned that people are having to dip into their SDS money to pay for what I would say is essential services. But I'm in the fortunate position that I'm on the leadership board where this is getting referred to. So I'll refrain from making too much comment today, and I'll certainly be raising those issues or some of those issues at the leadership board. Thank you.
Thank you. I know it's challenging times, there's difficult circumstances. I took comfort in the increments going up. They were a lot lower than what was presented to us back in 2017-18 when the charging policy was first bandied about. So yeah, as I say, it's a decision for the council, but certainly I do appreciate the time that was spent to get our heads around it. Fiona, I see your hands up. Sorry, actually, Michelle, you're first.
Thanks, thank you, Jennifer. Just a small comment. At the end of the paper, the implications of it, I was just looking at the risk section and wondering if it would be worth reflecting potentially some of the wider risks. So I think the risk just focuses on the financial impact to service users. I think when I was reading it and completely understand where the paper's coming from and the pressures, I just wondered if with changes like this happening, if there needs to be a reflection of the impact of the changes on other services. So people might actually choose not to pay and to have less service, but then consequently, does that mean that more people might end up accessing acute services? Could it lead to more falls, etc.? So I just wondered if the risk piece, maybe a little bit more thought about, the consequential risks down the line, it might be worth reflecting them, not to not put the paper through, but just actually to fully see what's coming ahead and make sure it's planned for appropriately.
Yeah, I would say that as a wise move, Michelle. Sarah.
Yes, we can certainly reflect that in the report which we submit to the leadership board. What I would say is just to remind people that there is a buffer built in. So when we do the financial assessment, it's about the affordability of an individual. So that 25% is already built in as a buffer. So we then have the taper. So that taper could be 100% of the accessible income that you could actually take. So you're still leaving people with buffers and built-in mechanisms to ensure there is affordability for heat, light, food, etc. So it's just to make sure that people really, that there is that awareness. But yeah, absolutely share people's view of, we'll make sure that the risk is highlighted further in the section of that report.
Thanks for that, Sarah, just highlighting the buffer because, it is very important. And to note as well, up until 2016, it was the taper was at 85. It was the Scottish Government that brought it down to 50. We're suggesting now it goes to 60. So, as you say, the buffer's there at 25 and the proposal is 50. So, Nairn, I see your hands up.
Yes, sorry, it was just to clarify then what the decision would be if there's going to be an amendment to this report before it goes to the council. So it just, I suppose, to be clear about that, because the current recommendations that are in the report that the board is considering just now are to note the contents of the report as they're set out in the papers, and then if you like to send that to the council with various other recommendations below that for them to note the content. So I think if the report is to be amended before it goes to the council, I think we need to be clear about what the content of those amendments are actually going to be. Alternatively, if what we're saying is that the report goes in the form that it is at the moment, then that's straightforwardly just agreeing what the recommendations there are. But if I'm understanding the discussion, I think the idea is that there should be some further narrative put into the report before it's sent to the council, and I think we need to be, we don't need to agree the specific wording, but we need to, I think, be clear about what that narrative is going to contain, if it's effectively an amended motion that would be being considered.
I wasn't thinking about amending it. I was thinking of just going for the recommendations and Sarah writing it in. But I see Sarah's hands up. So Sarah, if you want to come in.
Yeah, I thought we had agreed that in the risk section, which isn't in the body of the report, that we would just include the comments that Michelle had raised.
Yep, absolutely. I would agree with that.
Right.
Well,
so that is an amendment. Sorry, just to be clear, that is an amendment to the report. I mean, you're saying it's not in the body of the report, but this is an amended information that's going to be sent to the council.
It's not an amendment to the report itself, but the council report will have that reflection in it, so it doesn't change any of the recommendations in the report at all, and it doesn't change the policy at all, and the principles remain the same. The only thing is that when the report goes to the council, we will, in the implications of the report, flesh that out in more detail.
Okay, well, I do think that's a change to the recommendations that the board's being asked to approve. I mean, I hate to sound terribly pernickety about this, but the current recommendation asks Renfrewshire Council to note the content of the report. But what you're saying is that the content of the report is going to be different from what's currently in the papers. It's going to have further narrative in that risk section. As I say, all I'm trying to do here is to be absolutely crystal clear about what's being done here and what's being sent to the council for their consideration, and make sure that's properly set out in any decision that we make this morning.
Jacqueline, do you want to come in on this? Is it?
Yeah, I don't want to complicate things there, but I'm just thinking when the report goes to the leadership board, is the implications of the report not the council's take on it? So we could just take note of the comments and Sarah could pass that on. I don't know whether I'm complicating things here, but is the report just the exact same, or does the council have, you know, a different way of presenting it? I'm not sure. I realise I've just complicated things because nobody's saying anything.
No, Nairn has mic. Oh, there it goes.
Sorry, I was just looking again at this precise wording of the recommendations. I mean, I suppose what we need to be clear about is if a decision's being made this morning, as I think it is, for this report to be noted by this board, the recommendations that go with it to be noted, and then be the recommendations and the report accompanying that, which contains the updated charging policy, to be sent to the council to consider. That's fine, and it's clear what's happening. What's now being suggested is that there's going to be other information added to that that's going to be sent to the council. And what I want to know is how that is being done. Is it going into the report that's being sent, in which case there is being an amendment effectively made to the report before it's sent? Or is this some extra information that's going to be sent alongside the report? Or what? How is that information being communicated to the council if that's what the intention is?
Okay, Sarah, see your hands up again.
Yes, all I would do, and I think we're overcomplicating this significantly, is I would be adding to the implications of the report further paragraph in line with what Michelle had asked us to do, and that's all it is. It doesn't change the body of the report, it doesn't change any of the recommendations whatsoever, and it is a separate report to the council. So the body of the report, the recommendations, the principles do not change at all.
Okay.
Right. Okay, that's clear enough then. If that's what the decision is, then as I say, I think that's clear enough.
Good, I'm glad of that. Right, so if we just officially note the content of the report, note the recommendations summarised in 2.2, and approve the submission of the recommendations to the Renfrewshire Council for consideration. That is the recommendations. And can we agree that? Yes, thumbs up. Okay, item 7, sustainable futures.
That's
Francis.
me. Okay.
So this paper provides a further update on our Sustainable Futures programme following the IJB's agreement that a range of proposals that were presented at its November meeting are further assessed. Those proposals are set out in section 3.2 of the report. The paper provides an update on the nature of the ongoing engagement that we're taking just now and the next steps for progressing the development of impact assessments and EQIAs with the intention of bringing these back to the IJB in March. The paper also provides an update on the position following the Scottish Government budget position for 24-25. And as we've already discussed as part of the Chief Officer's update and also the financial position, we now anticipate that that budget gap could be bigger than we originally projected. So as a result, this will require greater levels of savings to be identified as part of this Sustainable Futures programme. And it is likely that these will have a deeper impact and require continued difficult decisions to be made by the IJB. The paper also references the additional Sustainable Futures programme relating to the non-residential charging. However, this has already been covered and considered by members as part of the last paper. So there are really just a couple of points that I would want to bring to members' attention in relation to this paper relating to the current engagement process. So since this paper's been submitted, we've actually had to extend the period of the engagement beyond the end of January for a range of reasons. So we'd originally set out that it would run and conclude at the end of January. One of our sessions had to be rescheduled due to adverse weather earlier in the week. We've also paused the planned service user engagement with our learning disability service, and this is just to allow further discussion and planning with legal guardians. It's important to note that service users do have a legal right to expect engagement on the proposals affecting them, and this needs to be reflected within our EQIA. We'll need to demonstrate how we've achieved this. However, we are committed to ensuring that we do this sensitively and without raising anxieties. For that reason, we're taking a bit of time and before we reschedule those. I also just wanted to highlight the members the strength of feeling amongst a large number of carers in relation to the proposals, which most of you will be aware of, both to the proposals and the wider ongoing certainty around the future of services beyond the ones currently being engaged on. These anxieties and concerns have been raised at our planning sessions, but also through a range of communications which some of you will have received. And we fully recognise that this is a highly concerning time for those that are affected. And we've acknowledged those concerns in the paper, and the engagement sessions have understandably been really challenging. However, we have been disappointed that we've had to deal with some inappropriate behaviour and also some inaccurate information being circulated by a very small number of individuals. This has had an impact by increasing anxieties amongst the wider stakeholders, and on occasions it has discouraged some of our other carers from feeling that they can express their views as part of the process. It has also placed quite considerable pressure on our partnership officers, particularly as we are trying to continue to deliver all our services in parallel with this process and maintain a strong performance. Happy to take any questions or bring in my fellow heads of service involved in some of the proposals. Thanks.
Thank you, Frances. I know it's not been easy, you know, it's really difficult when there's inaccurate information getting put around, you know. I know that a number of constituents have came to me thinking there's a closure when there's not, it's a merger. Other constituents have written to me concerned about things that are never ever been discussed, you know, closures of respite and things like that. Absolutely anxiety going through the roof of our staff members that are having to deal with this is alongside the carers and the parents and the, you know, service users. So that's really difficult to deal with, is when there's inaccurate information getting put around. So, and I thank you again for the time you've spent with us And I wrote to you yesterday with 3 dates in the diary, so I'm okay to attend. Right, we've got a few hands up here. Ian McMillan's first.
Yeah, this has obviously been a very difficult process, and I would certainly never condone any abuse that's been made to staff of whatever level, whether it's senior level or people on the ground. I would never condone that, and it is disappointing that some inaccurate information has been going about. And I don't know if that's deliberately putting out that information or it's just the people are mistaking themselves. I'm not entirely sure, but given the sensitivities of this whole situation, it doesn't help whether it's intended or not. Listen, I know it's difficult, but you know, I know staff are doing a job on this, and I do have some sympathy, having been through similar situations myself. But that is people's jobs. That's what you do, and you just need to sometimes go on with it. And certainly as a local, as a councillor, as well as a member of IJB, I've certainly had a lot of people contacting me about this, and I've done my best to reply to every single person, because I think people deserve that respect and that courtesy to get back to them. Having just attended the rally outside, when there was about 50, 60 people there, that was all very well behaved, dignified, and made some good points to myself. So I was glad to have the time and the opportunity to meet some of these people. I've also been to people's houses to go and see them and meet some of the service users, and I hate using that word, service users, but I've met some of the families, and that's been good for me as well, just to refresh my mind, you know, what we're actually considering here. Now, I don't want. I think we'll get an opportunity in March to discuss this thoroughly. I think there is still a lot of engagement still to be done, and I'm starting off, you know, in Monday morning, going to the Anchor Centre to speak to some of the people from the Mirren and the Milldale. I don't want to. I think they've been very, very well organised, those parents, and that's taken away. It's maybe taken away from some of the other issues, but the other issues are just as important, and I don't think we should ever forget that. And so, as I say, I look forward to going to some of the engagement. I did moan and groan the last time that I wasn't included. The parents have certainly made sure I've been included, and I welcome that. And I'm looking forward to going to some of the meetings to hear firsthand the views. At the moment, I'm not entirely convinced by some of the proposals put forward. I'll be honest and say that I am not convinced at all, but I will reserve my fuller comments until I've spoken to the engagement process, and I'm more than happy to speak to any parents, any service user. I'll be happy to go to their house, happy for them to come into the council, more than happy to do that. I'm more than happy to do work out with the official, if you want to call it, the official engagement process in this. And if anybody's watching, I'll send that invitation to people that I'm willing to and happy to speak to people. But this is a very difficult process, and we're dealing with some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And I think it's important we still remember it. I know that's in the report. And I'm glad that's in the report. Sometimes these wee comments maybe get missed because of the headlines. But I also worry as well that when we're making this cut, or well, possible cut to services, there's an awful lot of young people now having educational needs, special needs. If you speak to any of the primary schools teachers or head teachers, they'll tell you there's a huge number of kids now in mainstream education with really severe needs. In 5-10 years' time, will we be revisiting any decision we make because there's a whole load of people just going through the system, if you like, at the moment? I don't know. Can you see it into the future? As I say, it is a difficult time, and say we'll obviously have a kind of fuller discussion on the implications of this in March.
And it's a merge, not closure, Ian, it's not, we're not taking away the service, I just feel as if people are, you know, and speaking about the young as well, a lot of the drive behind the SDS is so that the younger generation coming through have an opportunity to do what they want to do, take a bit more control, you know. So, you know, as I say, it'll all come out, but certainly I know that is a drive behind a lot of the young ones, you know, maybe not wanting the same building-based service, but the option is theirs. That's the benefit of SDS, is the decision is theirs with the budget. Fiona, see your hands up.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. I just want to acknowledge the depth of feeling and the distress that this will be causing parents, and I think we can't understate how heartfelt that is, regardless of whether these are people who feel well able to voice their views and articulate well in terms of that, and indeed some of the people who have contacted myself because they've not felt able to do that whenever they're in particular meetings. I have taken the opportunity to respond to these people, but also to pass them on to the officers to look at the individual circumstances and what that actually means to those individuals involved in the whole process. I think change is very difficult for everyone, but when you come to people who have vulnerability in terms of their own needs, I understand the depth of feeling that's meant in terms of that. I have also booked to go into a couple of the sessions as well, so that I can hear what people have got to say, and want to thank them for giving us the opportunity and making that happen. Finally, just in terms of this will come to the March board, and at that point I think we'll all have the opportunity to take into account what's been said at these engagement sessions. If there is anything else that we can consider as part of those proposals, I will be looking at that then. But I just thought I couldn't let this session go by without explaining to people that I do understand how difficult and complex this will be in terms of their own family arrangements, and the potential impact that it would have on any person that's supported through these services. Thanks.
Thank you, Fiona. Thanks for that contribution. John Matthews, see your hands up.
I would like to affirm what Fiona has said in terms of what's happening to people as a result of these. As a parish minister for 20 years in Rockhill and Postle Park, I was in the front line of journeying with people. But I also want to say to Frances and her team that as Vice Chair, we recognise the work that they're doing that has been foisted on them. They didn't volunteer for this or decide that they wanted to go in and make the services better or cut the services or make them more efficient or whatever. They've been given this task, they're doing this task, and I would want this meeting to commend her that she tries as best she can. She's got two jobs. One is to keep the show on the road, as well as having to come up with proposals of this sort. Now, we all know that, and you do, Jennifer, and you say it yourself too, but I thought I would come in too with my voice to say that we respect that she's got these two jobs, and that she's trying to keep her head down and deal with the task in hand, as well as keep the show on the road. And the meeting would want to say thank you for that too.
Thank you for that, John, because you're so right. You know, a lot of times, you know, as Frances will say herself, is doing all this while keeping the lights on, because you forget, you know, we are a high-performing HSEP. We must not lose sight of that. But given the challenges that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, it makes it incredibly difficult for you. So you really do have all our thanks. But thank you, John. Alan McNiven, I see your hands up, Alan.
Thanks, Jennifer. It's just to note in the paper the commitment to continuing conversations with the third sector organisations, some of which obviously are providing services to some of the people who are obviously concerned. So it's really just to note that and say I appreciate the fact that that conversation is ongoing, and if there's anything we can do, engage to help provide a platform, Frances or Laura, in relation to further conversations with the sector organisations or beyond that, just let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan. That could be really helpful. Frances.
Yeah, it was just to say thanks for the comments, and it was just to note that really the comments about the working in parallel really relate to our operational
services while I'm presenting this paper and giving an overview. The real focus is on Laura, Karen and their teams who are fronting the very specific proposals and responding to the carers' concerns, working with the staff. So it was really just to acknowledge that whilst I'm presenting this, it's the operational areas that are facing the direct pressure, but I'm sure members know that, but it was just to clarify it. Thanks.
Thanks, Frances. So if there's no more questions or comments, can we agree that recommendations? I'll just read through them. So it's to note the update provided in the Scottish budget in section 4. It's to note the updates provided the stakeholders engagement process that are currently underway in section 5 and 6. And to note the further activity to be undertaken in advance of the IGB's meeting in March. Okay. So if that's all agreed, we'll move on to item 8, which is the performance management update mid-year position. Frances,
Yeah,
yourself again?
That's me again. So this paper updates members on our mid-year performance. So it covers the period April to September this year, or where that data is not available, we provide the most up-to-date position. Members will be aware that we made a number of changes to the scorecard and the performance indicators at the meeting in September as part of a new improved scorecard for this year. But that does mean it's not possible to have full baseline information to set targets for some of the new adult social care indicators that we've introduced, and also to draw direct comparisons to the overall performance for 22-23 year end compared to the current year. So of the scorecard's 48 indicators, we've got 28 that have targets and 20 for information only. However, as we build up trend analysis in the coming years, we can use this to have additional targets in future years. So of the 28 indicators that have targets, 5 are red, 10 amber and 13 are green. And this report follows a very similar structure to the previous updates that members are familiar with, where we go on and we highlight where we've improved in performance and give a flavour of some of the work that's been carried out or is ongoing to make those improvements. Also areas where we need to improve, areas of focus, and what work is underway to address those areas. We also provide an update on unscheduled care performance, and then at the back of the report we appendix the full scorecard for members to see. So I don't plan to go through the full report, but there are a few things I would like to draw to members' attention. Firstly, in section 4, so section 4 highlights where we've got improvements in performance. I thought it was worth highlighting the really significant increase that we've seen around adults with new anticipatory care plans, and they're going to be going forward be called future care plans. And this is on the back of some really successful work led by our anticipatory care planning group. So in actual fact, last year we had 156 plans for the full year, and this year we've already got 269 at mid-year point, and we've exceeded the annual target. So that's a huge achievement led by Pauline Robbie and the anticipatory care planning group.
Pauline Robbie.
And the other real improvement is around the percentage of primary care mental health teams getting their first appointment within 4 weeks. So in March last year, we were sitting at 45.6%. And while we're not at the target of 100%, in September, that was sitting at 88.9%. So that's a real marked improvement.
Definitely.
In section 5, the areas of improvement, as I mentioned, we've got 5 indicators that are red. And I think the most important thing I'd want is just to reassure members that all the 5 indicators are moving in the right direction. In September, all but psychological therapies improved, showed an improved position to where we were at the end
of 22-23. However, the latest figures in October for psychological therapies also show an increase, where it's up to 79.5% of patients started treatment within 18 weeks, and that's against 70% last year. So that's all 5 areas going in the right direction, and we've provided some narrative to support the work that we're doing around that. I've also highlighted in section 5 our projected position around prescribing and the anticipated variance. Now, whilst there isn't a target against this, I just felt it was an important one to highlight, as we've had a number of discussions and meetings about the significant pressure that prescribing places on us. So it was just to show, in line with what I guess members would expect from Sarah's financial report, we are forecasting an increase to 7.69% from just over 5% last year. Finally, we have got an update on unscheduled care performance in section 6, but I'm aware there's a paper on that going later in this meeting, and also we'll bring a more focused paper on unscheduled care as our performance update to the March meeting. So I won't go into that, but we have already talked about our strong performance around delayed discharge earlier in the meeting. So very happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Frances. Do we have any questions or comments? Ian McMillan.
A couple of comments, a couple of questions. I know that we're doing pretty well in breastfeeding. I don't think I need to go into the great details and how important that is for young children. So well done on that. The 2 issues I would like to highlight is one is the sickness rate among staff, which is slightly above our targets, and I just would asking how concerning that is, and what we're doing to try and reduce that. The other one is the issue on accident and emergency. I noticed that there's a kind of slightly higher turnout out at the hospital. And just wondering if that's been related to how difficult it can be to get an appointment at the doctors. People are a bit reluctant to have the mad scramble at 8 o'clock to try and get an appointment. And sometimes I feel as if people are just presenting themselves to the accident and emergency. Now, I had an experience last week with the doctors, and I must admit my doctors were excellent. Within an hour of me phoning them up, I was down there. Something was sorted, and that was me, and I moved on, and I was able to enjoy my weekend because I was really worried about something. I was really happy, but I'm not entirely sure if that's everybody's experience. So if you can somebody can just tell me maybe why that is moving up, that's creeping up the presentation accident and emergency, and if it is indeed related to people's, even if it is a preconception, that it's quite difficult to get an appointment with their doctors. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Okay, mic on, Frances.
Yeah, I don't know if Stuart wants to come in first around the reference to, he's got his hand up around GPs, and then I can come in around staff absence. Thanks.
Right, sure.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I suppose it's just important to note that the metric is looking at percentage of people who are waiting over 4 hours. It's not looking at A&E attendances. And if we look at A&E attendances, and that, colleagues from the acute side of the system may know better, but my understanding is attendances at A&E are still far below where they were pre-COVID. So the actual volume of people turning up to A&E is not increased. The reason people are waiting longer in general is due to the challenges with flow through the hospital. So people will be in A&E with effectively challenged at finding somewhere to see these people. Then when they need admitting, getting them out of A&E to be admitted, because as we know, there's huge pressure on the acute side of the system as well. So, I think whilst I totally accept there are, we've been aware of cases where there've been kind of suboptimal access for periods of time when there've been workforce challenges with primary care. I'm really keen that we don't ever lay the problems at the front door of the hospital at the general practice door, because we're really kind of seeing huge numbers of patients being seen in primary care and general practice, again probably higher than we were seeing pre-pandemic. So I think I just want to kind of not have that kind of unchallenged as an assumption without kind of the data to back that up, because as I say, the numbers attending A&E are lower. In general, A&E are very good at redirecting people as well, so that if people do attend A&E and it's not the right place for them, you know, that they will be advising people of the most appropriate route of contact. That could include community pharmacy, it could include a GP, it could include NHS Inform for kind of general health advice prior to that. So you know, the waiting, whilst the A&E waiting time is a challenge, and I know acute colleagues are working very hard on that, I don't think anyone in the A&E department would say the problem is people turning up at A&E. It's actually the people who are in A&E who are actually quite unwell need to be seen, but there is a challenge with flow in the hospital system, and they're doing lots of innovative work around trying to move people out of A&E and ensure they get assessed somewhere safe and appropriate.
Thanks for that, Stuart. Christine, I see your hand went up during Stuart's.
Thanks, Jennifer. Just in the back of what Stuart's saying, I don't have the figures to hand, but we can absolutely circulate them, because Renfrewshire's, as Stuart said, our performance in relation to the numbers of people presenting at A&E in the main for us, RAH, is lower. So we actually have got a whole host of things in place in the community to assist our colleagues in acute and take the pressure away from the front door. So as Stuart said, lots of activity in primary care, the breadth of primary care, so not just our GP practices. We also are working closely with our care homes around call before conveying, and that's around being in contact with the HSCP and seeing what we can do in the community if there's any concerns over a resident, rather than automatically looking to take them to A&E. And we've also got our first response service that sits at the front door of RAH, and we've got excellent performance around that, and that's about avoiding and redirecting patients back into the community with a support package to prevent admission to hospital. So a whole range of things are happening in Renfrewshire. So as Stuart said, that performance indicator is around the time that people are spending in A&E, and we know that right across not just Scotland but the UK, that there's significant pressure within our front door and within our emergency departments. So that's not around about the number of people that are attending, that's around the amount of time they're waiting.
Thank you both for that clarification. Ian, I hope that helps to reassure you.
Can I just confirm, I was reading from 6.2 in the report, and it says A&E attendance figures were approximately 3.75% higher. So I'm not entirely sure. I'm getting told they're lower, and then in the report it says it's higher. So I'm not entirely sure what the actual case is. That's the figures I was referring to at 6.2.
So it's definitely lower, Ian, but we'll circulate that, and it might be that we've just described that wrongly in that paper, but we'll absolutely circulate to IJB members the detail.
Okay,
sorry, Christine, I think it's in the other report that I'll bring, the A&E attendance. So for 2023, there's a decrease of 7% in the 2019 figures. Attendance at...
Your mic can...
Sorry, apologies.
No, we did get the start of it. It was just the latter part there.
Yeah. So I can bring that kind of information in the unscheduled care report next.
Okay, thanks for that. And Fiona, I see your hands up.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. Just first of all, to acknowledge the number of areas that we have improvement in, and in particular for me, there's the primary care mental health appointments that we're seeing now that we've managed to get staff, and that's been a long-standing one.
Absolutely.
So just to acknowledge that's really good to see, and I can just see that getting better and better if we maintain our staffing levels there. My kind of final question is also in relation to A&E. What we have is we've got the waiting time percentages for people who wait for more than 4 hours.
Yeah.
But we don't have any detail on how much longer they're waiting. So on average, what is for those people? How long are they actually waiting? What's the average time? And for me, that would be helpful. And I just wondered why that wouldn't be something that we would include here. Thanks.
Francis?
I'm not sure if we actually have that detail, if that's provided by acute, but I'll certainly follow that up, Fiona, and see if we can show it, that, you know, how much, you know, are people just missing the 4-hour wait, or if it's longer. So we'll look into that for you and follow that up.
Okay, thanks for that. Francis.
Yeah, I just want to, I realise that I've not picked up on the point around staff absence that was raised. So it was just briefly to reassure Ian that this is a continued focus of the SMT, and discussed at most of our meetings, where we look to really proactively manage this. But in addition to managing attendance, alongside that, I chair the workforce and planning group, and we work with our colleagues more broadly around the workforce plan and increasing capacity, looking at vacancies, things like that, to minimise the pressure on teams and look to support our teams. And also critical to that is general staff health and wellbeing. And I won't go into too much detail, but we did present a paper at our staff side yesterday outlining the work to re-establish a staff health and wellbeing group, and we've invited our staff side and trade union colleagues to join that. Also, prior to Christmas, our health improvement team did drop-ins around all our staff bases to offer support to teams, and we found that to be really valuable, and on the back of that they're planning to do more over the next coming weeks, and to make this a continued feature as well. And we've also got a range of work underway around equalities and ensuring that we're doing work to make our workplaces inclusive as possible as well. So I guess it's a multi-faceted approach that we're taking around this, and happy to update more fully on some of that work at another meeting if helpful. Thanks.
Yes, it's good to hear, Francis. Thanks. Hope that helps, Ian.
Yes, thanks. Thanks very much, Francis.
No more questions or comments then. Can we approve the performance management mid-year report? Agreed. Yep. That leaves us item 9, the NHS GGC unscheduled care update. Is that yourself, Cam?
Yeah, that's myself. So I may be able to pick up in this report some of the questions from the previous paper. The unscheduled care report is one in a series of reports, so the IGME members will be familiar with this report. And as presented previously, the report is in respect to all 6 HSCPs within GGC-wide area. In terms of the main points that I would want to pick out from the report, I won't go into all of the detail that's been presented. But as I said, as previously noted, national reporting on unscheduled care continues to be organised into our 3 high impact areas, which is around our virtual capacity, our discharge without delay, and our community focused integrated care. And all of the work streams within our unscheduled care delivery programme fall into these 3 high impact change areas. In terms of the trends that we were just describing, as Stuart pointed out and Christine pointed out, we are seeing a decrease in numbers in attendances at A&E, and for 2023 we saw a 7% decrease since the 2019 figures. And that trend that we're seeing across GGC is really closely mirrored in Renfrewshire itself. So in Renfrewshire, attendances at the RAH really mirror that decrease of 7%. However, what we are seeing is an increase in complexity of patients who are attending at A&E, and for those patients, even the average length of stay and the time that they're in A&E is reflective of the complexities that are coming through the door. So people are coming at a later stage in terms of their ill health journey, and what we're seeing is the average length of stay within our GGC hospitals has moved from 8.3 days in 2019 to 10.2 days in 2023. And that's above the Scottish average, which is 9 days. So again, that is really reflective of the complexity of health that we're seeing coming through acts in emergency, and maybe that will lend itself actually for people being in A&E longer, because people are coming very ill to the front door. And I think that 7% decrease really could be, as Christine described earlier, is attributed to all of the efforts that we're putting into within the community to support our acute colleagues and to prevent that admission at A&E, and signposting people at a very early stage. And that's all of that is kind of described in the report. And Francis has picked up, you know, some of the work that we're doing to avoid admission attendance around our anticipatory care plan, and the work around that, our future care planning, which really describes the patient, what the patient's wants and needs are, particularly for our patients in care at home who really don't want to be taken to hospital from their care homes, and that's described really well within plans. So we try where absolutely possible to keep people from going into hospital if that's their desire, and that care is organised for them within their care homes. In terms of the other bits, and I'll only pick out a few because we've already kind of described the anticipatory care plans, but in terms of the other pieces of work that I think are of note, are the whole first response service, and Christine described that. That service has now been active for a year, and the work that it's done has actually been exemplary in terms of working alongside our colleagues for a new service to go in and embed itself within the RAH and be accepted and work alongside hand in hand with our acute colleagues. And that has been exemplary in terms of the impact that that's been having. Our December figures, we were able to have all of the patients that we saw, and that was 66 directly, and 100 within A&E, and within the medical receiving unit, we saw a further 168 patients. And of those patients, we managed to turn around 65% of them and get them back home, with support from our colleagues within the community-based home first response service, but also our colleagues within our district nursing team, our care at home service. So we work collaboratively across all of our teams to ensure that it's a safe discharge for patients and that we keep them within the community where they want to be. So that team continue to perform highly. The other team that I would want to pick out, or the other work that I would want to pick out, is a call before you convey. That's work that's happening, as Christine described, within our care homes. We've done lots of work around our falls prevention within the care homes, and we work with those patients who have failed. But the call before you convey really targets those patients who haven't had a fall, who've maybe got respiratory problems. And what we've seen from the pilot in December, we saw an amazing work that was undertaken within within Renfrewshire. In terms of that work, we saw 34 patients in our residents in December, and of those residents, we managed to maintain, I think it was 93% within their care homes. Only 2 of those patients went on to require hospital admission. And again, that's just as reflective of the work of the teams, but that work hand in hand to prevent patients or people turning up unnecessarily, or where we can support them within the community, we're able to do that. And perhaps that's reflecting that kind of 7% downturn in admissions to A&E and for the 2019 figures. But I'm happy to pick up any points or any questions that anyone has.
Okay, Cam. Do we have any comments or questions? Yes, Jacqueline.
Yeah, it's something that I raised last year, Karen, and it was just about people presenting to A&E, particularly elderly people, because their homes are cold, and you know, in the cost of living crisis and with fuel poverty, I know that really impacted last year. I don't know if you would have any figures or anything like that, or even anecdotally, if you've heard that that's been recurring this year. I imagine it would have.
I don't have any figures, Jacqueline, around that, but what I can reassure is for the elderly people that we are working with through our care at home service, that's one of the points or one of the issues that we are looking at when the team are in there. Is the house cold? Is the person cold? Giving advice, everybody's income that we work with, we maximise to ensure that they either claiming their grant, but that we're ensuring that that income is maximised. And we're also doing that in our locality teams as well. You know, when we're going out to assess people, we're looking at, is the house warm? Have we given that advice to people? And where necessary, you know, we're supporting people financially to ensure that they're not falling into fuel poverty. But I don't have the figures around A&E attendance, but I don't know if we will be able to gather it, but I certainly will have a look to see if that's something we're able to consider.
Thanks, Karen. Sorry, Jennifer, is it okay if I come back?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, just to say, I remember that from last year that the care team were doing that, and I think it's really important to highlight that. Really good work. I know district nurse team also are making referrals to money advice services as well, so that was good to see. That was via the NHS board. So it's good that all various strands of HSEP and NHS are joining up to make sure that people who are vulnerable are getting that help. So that's good to know.
No, it's really good to know, because it wasn't until we had this discussion last year that it really kind of opened my eyes, because I didn't realise that, you know, yes, we all hear it, you know, about obviously being reluctant to turn on the heating, but I didn't realise it was because they weren't turning on the heating, it was making them more rigid. I know myself with my own condition, I've got to have the heating on full time or I become rigid, and it's through that rigidity that the fall would come and the consequences. So absolutely. So it's really good to hear, Karen, that your staff are taking note when they go into a home to make sure it's adequately heated. So thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, can we note the report? Which takes us to item 10, unless I've missed anything. No, item 10, the date of our next meeting, which is 10 AM on the 22nd of March. Yes, is that right? Because I have had a bit of a problem with my agenda this morning. A puppy has eaten half of it. So just in case I was missing anything. So item 10 is the date of the next meeting. Okay, so that just leaves me to thank you all for your attendance here this morning. I know it's challenging, these meetings, they really are, they're difficult. And I know that all of us share concern, you know, we all got involved in this line of work to help people. And especially when you're in the health board, then you're always looking at the most vulnerable. So to put ourselves in this situation is somewhere where I think none of us ever thought we were going to be. But I thank you all for your hard work and your dedication that you've committed towards it, and your attendance here today to support us. Okay, so thank you very much, and I'll see you all at the next meeting.
And thank you to the chair
Thanks,
for
Jennifer.
leading us through.
Thank you all. Goodbye.